Welcome to the Wing Space podcast, a place to take up space, a space for you to settle in, sit back, relax, and focus a little bit on health, wellness, faith, family, and this crazy thing called life.
This podcast is not a replacement for mental health treatment or professional health care. In case of crisis or emergency, please contact your local healthcare provider or dial 911.
Hey there, and welcome to the Wing Space podcast, a place to take up space. Today, I am finishing our conversation about sleep. If you didn't listen to the previous episode, I'm going to encourage you to jump off this episode and go listen to that one. We talked about some ideas about healthy habits, why sleep is so important. And if you haven't listened to our season 1 episodes about sleep, I'd encourage you to do that too, because in those episodes, I really dive into why sleep is so important and some of the negative effects that can happen from being sleep deprived. But for today, I'm going to look at some of those not so healthy habits that some people engage in, and we're going to explore how you can make some changes. Again, we talked about caffeine. It is this vicious cycle. I wake up, I'm exhausted because I didn't sleep, so I drink caffeine. I'm so tired, so I drink more caffeine. Now I can't sleep because I had caffeine, and I wake up and I'm tired and I need more caffeine. It's a vicious cycle. Caffeine may not be the place that you want to start, because if you've never tried to come off caffeine before, be prepared, because you will probably have a headache for a day or two. It's hard. Caffeine is a drug. Our body responds to it the same way that it responds to other drugs. And so there is an addictive component of caffeine. It might be one of those things where you consider going from 2 glasses to 1.5, or 2 cups to 1.5 to 1. It might be that you're having a 2 or a 3 o'clock caffeine. We're not just talking about coffee here. We're talking about sodas, we're talking about energy drinks, caffeine in general. So maybe instead of a 3-4 o'clock drink, you're having one at like 1 or 2, and then slowly you can get all of your caffeine before noon. I'm not saying you're going to drink 6 or 7 sodas before noon. Ideally, you would drink less and you would finish it earlier in the day. The other thing that's important for timing is that you want to consider when you are eating. So when we go to bed, we need our body to be able to rest. And if we are putting a big heavy meal on our belly and then expecting our body to go to sleep, then it's not going to work, because our body's trying to digest food while we think it needs to go to sleep. Again, 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed is when you should have your last meal, so that your body has a chance to get that early digestion taken care of, and then you can actually sleep. We haven't touched on the environment much, but I want you to consider what your home environment is like. I want you to consider what your bedroom environment is like. There's 2 things that should happen in your bed. Parents, here's a little trigger warning for you. 2 things should happen in your bed: sleep and sex. That's it. Because our body needs to know what happens in the bed, right? If you watch TV in bed, if you read in bed, if you do crosswords in bed, if you sit and talk to your husband or your kids in bed for hours in the evening, then just because you go from sitting to lying and turn the lights off, your body doesn't know that, oh, now it's time to go to sleep. Your bed needs to be used for those 2 things and those 2 things only. I will give one small caveat, and that is I do lay in bed for about 20-ish minutes and read before I go to bed, but I'm also reading a book that is putting me to sleep, so that I just put the book down and reach over and turn off the light. Sometimes I fall asleep, and when my husband comes to bed, he turns off the light. But I'm not going to lay in bed for 2, 3, 4 hours and read before I try to go to bed. What does your bedroom environment look like? Is it chaos? Is it quiet? Is it dark? Are there lots of lights? There are recommendations that say your temperature in your bedroom should be no higher than 68 degrees. Full disclosure, I would freeze at 68 degrees. My house temperature is a little bit warmer than that, but you have to take into account that our body temperature fluctuates while we're sleeping. So a cooler environment is easier for sleep, and a dark environment is better for sleep. Even natural light coming in through the window, or like that ambient light that comes from our screens or an alarm clock, can interrupt your sleep. Consider how to take away all of that ambient light so that you can not be interrupted when you're sleeping. And you want it to be quiet. Now, some people say, well, I gotta have noise. Okay, white noise is different than noise. Some people watch TV at night and they fall asleep. Your brain is still paying attention to that TV, even when you are asleep or falling asleep. I can totally attest to that. When my husband works shift work, I don't really sleep well and I tend to fall asleep to the TV. Not as often as I used to, but I still do sometimes. And there's times in the morning that I will remember things about shows that I don't even remember. I don't remember watching the show, but I remember components of the show because my brain was still hearing it. So white noise is good. Let's turn the TV off. Let's turn the radio off. The fan, that kind of thing is good because it's white noise, right? So in the previous episode, kind of part one of this two-part episode series, I had shared with you that just this morning I had seen some people commenting on social media about not being able to sleep. So it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and that person couldn't sleep, and they're posting on social media. So what are they doing when they can't sleep? Is they're scrolling. One of the things that so many of us do is that we are on our screens, whether it's an iPad or our phone or a laptop or even the television, we are on our phones until the minute we go to sleep. And not only are we consuming tons and tons and tons of information, but we are also exposing our eyes, our brain to that blue light that causes that stimulation. And we're just getting our bodies revved up when what we need to be doing is calming our bodies down. If you're waking up in the middle of the night and you are posting on social media, that means that what you're doing when you wake up in the middle of the night is you're picking up your phone and you're scrolling. So let's talk about screens. Ideally, you would turn your screens off at least 30 minutes, ideally 60 to 90 minutes before you want to go to sleep. For some people, television is less of a problem than phones, but you might want to try what you can and play around with what works for you. And if you are going to stay on the TV, consider what you're watching. If you're watching really stressful, if you're watching the news, if you're watching like murder mystery shows or really sad shows, all that information's getting stuck in your head, and then you're just going to bed, and then you can't pay attention to going to sleep because your body is so focused on all of it that it just consumed. So fill that space with something else. Talking to your family, cleaning up the kitchen, getting prepared for the next day, setting out your clothes, kind of getting into that nightly routine. Reading is a really good thing to do. For some people, they have to consider what they're reading. I cannot read educational books or things that I really need to pay attention to before bed. I also can't read really like deep mystery, like psychological thriller stuff before bed. I need more of just like the Hallmark movie of a book, right? Stepping away from the screens as close to as far away from bedtime as you can. And do not, I repeat, do not pick up your phone in the middle of the night if you cannot sleep. Please do not pick up your phone. What happens when we jump on social media? We end up scrolling, and before we know it, 15, 20, 30, 60 minutes has gone by, and all we've been doing is scrolling. So what ends up happening is that we're staying awake because we're scrolling, and what we think is, I can't sleep. Well, you can't sleep because you're scrolling. So please do not pick up your phone in the middle of the night if you wake up in the middle of the night. Do not. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you have to use the bathroom, do so with as little disruption as possible. Don't turn the lights on if you don't have to, or turn as few lights on as you need to. Go to the restroom, wash your hands, get back in bed. Make it simple. If you wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom and then you get back in bed and your brain and mind are racing, or if you wake up in the middle of the night just because you wake up and your mind is racing, here's my trick. I want to encourage all of you to get a notebook. Any kind of notebook, it doesn't matter. It can be a pad, it can be a post-it notes, it can be anything. And I want you to take your notebook and open it up to a blank page and put the pen on top of it. And then in the middle of the night when you wake up, I want you to just write down on this piece of paper what's on your mind. Go to the store, I need to get milk, drop off that thing at the post office, pick up this, do this, call this person. Don't turn on the light, just scribble it on the page. There may be things the next day that you cannot read because you've just written in the middle of the night, and it's weird that we can't really read our own handwriting when we scribble it. But you're going to dump all that stuff out of your brain, and you're going to have it on that piece of paper. If you are a person who has a hard time going to sleep, I want you to do that same thing before you go to sleep. I want you to, the last thing you do before you turn the light out is I want you to do a brain dump. Put your pen on the paper and just start writing everything. I listened to this podcast the other day, and this girl was saying that this is what I need to do, so I'm doing it, and just let it fly. Sometimes things will come out that you need to remember. Maybe you just put a circle around them so the next morning you can say, oh, I got to buy milk, or oh, I got to call that person. A lot of times it's just going to be junk, and you need to get it out of your brain in order to be able to sleep. The other thing that happens sometimes when we have a hard time sleeping and we wake up in the middle of the night is that we just get up. We get up, we turn the lights on, we maybe turn the TV on. Someone told me the other day they couldn't sleep and they got up at like 2 o'clock in the morning and they like started making casseroles and stuff like that. You've completely turned your brain on and now your brain doesn't know that it's time to sleep. So please don't do that. Maybe you get a drink of water. Maybe you do some deep breathing. Maybe you sit in silence or just sit in the dark. Maybe you read a book, not picking up your phone. Maybe you read a book for a few minutes. Two of the best ways that I have found to fall asleep, the first one is that I imagine nothingness. I literally imagine blank. I close my eyes. You know, sometimes you close your eyes and there's images that you can see or there's colors and shapes and things. I just imagine it being completely black. And I just deep breathe through the deep black. When I talk about deep breathing, we're talking about like 4-7-8 breathing, right? In through the nose for 4, you hold it for 7, out through the mouth for 8. You do that 3 or 4 times. Box breathing, in for 4, hold it for 4, out for 4, hold it for 4, in a rhythmic cycle. But do some kind of deep breathing while you're imagining nothingness. The other thing that I've found that's helpful is that I count backwards from 300. It's an arbitrary number. I picked it one night because I just needed some help sleeping, and I'm breathing and I'm counting and I never get to 0 because at some point I fall asleep. I encourage you to not lay in bed too long though. If you wake up in the middle of the night or when you're going to sleep, and if you're laying in bed for more than 30 minutes, get up, reset, and try again. Maybe even go through some of those motions of the bedtime routine in terms of, maybe you use the restroom, maybe you splash some, maybe like a warm compress on your face, maybe you get just something light to drink, just a sip of water. You can do hot tea before you go to bed, maybe a chamomile or a lavender tea that can help to calm you. My worry is that so many people are saying I can't sleep, but it's because honestly, they have their phone in their hand and they're scrolling. And once you wake up your brain and start scrolling, you're just awake. So I would encourage you to put down your phone. In the other episode, we talked about the timing of things that are really important. I know we're busy families, busy moms, busy dads, and it's hard to go, come home, make sure everybody has dinner, their homework's done, everything's ready for the next day, and then now all of a sudden we got to go to bed. How can you take some of those tasks that you have to do in the evening and put them at a different time during the day, and then be able to not have so much to do in the evening so that you can engage in some kind of a bedtime routine, even if it's only 30 minutes. My bedtime routine is more like an hour. I have the convenience and the luxury of that. I didn't always have that, and I haven't always had that. But right now I have the luxury of that. I have teenagers, and I say goodnight to them, and I don't know what time they go to bed. More on teenage sleep at a later date for sure. But, even if it's only 15, 20, 30 minutes of some kind of a habitual routine to clue your body in that it's time to go to sleep. Are you working out too close to bedtime? Are you doing stressful things like having important family conversations or balancing checkbooks or paying the bill or reading over legal papers or getting work done, right? Are you doing stressful things too soon? I would say that 2 to 3 hour time period is a great thing to consider. No food, no alcohol, no stressful activities within 2 to 3 hours of bed. Just make that 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed kind of a sacred time to the best of your ability. Now, there's lots of ideas that I can throw out there, and I'm thinking a couple of people that I know have posted on social media talking about their insomnia. And you have to decide where you are going to start. Consider, right? Is it too much caffeine? Is it not enough movement? Is it too much stress in my life or lack of stress management in my life? Is it a medication? Is it a medical condition? Is it my environment? What are the things that are happening that are impacting your ability to go to sleep? And then where can you make a shift? Where can you make just a little bit of a tweak? Can you start that bedtime routine about 30 minutes before bed? Can you make the house quiet and dim the lights and turn off the noises? Can you unplug electronics? Let's say you have a solid bedtime routine and you're like, yeah, I've got that down, but I'm still not falling asleep or I'm not staying asleep. It's very likely that your circadian rhythm and your body is having a stress response. So you need to look at what you're doing during the day. Are you getting enough sunlight and exposure to natural sun or a light box if you have to? Are you being physically active? What kind of consumption do you have in terms of cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, caffeine? All those things play a part. Are you eating too late? Are you spending your whole evening in bed and then your body doesn't know what the bed is for? Is it too hot, too cold, too light in your bedroom? Consider breaking down your day into chunks and examining what does it look like. So I would say the first step to fixing your sleep routine is, what is my sleep routine? What does my day look like? One of the first questions that I ask all of my clients is, tell me what a typical day looks like. I know for some people there is no typical day, but just if you could, what's a typical day look like? What time do you wake up? What time do you eat your meals? What time do you exercise? What time do you go to bed? Are there other things happening throughout the course of the day, like kids' activities or appointments or whatever? And then we look at, okay, so where can we start to make some minor changes, some little tweaks that can help, so that ultimately it's not going to happen every night. It's not going to happen perfectly. But ultimately, what do you want it to look like? What I'm about to share with you is what my day looks like. And I'm going to forewarn you and say, this has not always been what my life has looked like. This is not always what my routine has been. And it's not like this every single day. However, I'm going to share with you what I typically do. So I typically wake up somewhere between 5 and 6. It kind of depends on the day and what time I'm going to bed. But I wake up between 5 and 6. And the first thing I do is I work out because that works for me. Some people need to be awake and they need to eat some food. But for me, it works well. I wake up and I work out. By the time I come up from the basement, it's still typically dark in my house, or maybe my husband has gotten up depending on what his schedule is. I make some hot tea and I go sit in my favorite room of my house. I read my Bible, I say my prayers, I do a little bit of light reading. I kind of look at my schedule for the day, assess what's going on, and get a plan going. I get ready, out the door I go. At some point in there, we're getting kids up for school and all that kind of stuff. But for me, my routine is, I call it jam. It's Jesus and me time, right? Because I'm working out and I'm doing my prayer, my Bible reading and stuff like that. I go to work. I don't drink caffeine. It's kind of my own personal thing. The tea I drink in the morning is herbal, but for the most part, especially these last couple months, having some digestive issues, maybe TMI, but anyway, no caffeine for me. Then at some point during the day, I get a 30, 45-minute walk in. It's either during the day, while I'm at work or when I first come home or, while dinner's in the oven, or sometimes I'll go out to the gym with the boys in the evening. It just depends on what the day is. But at some point in the day, I try to get a 30 to 45-minute walk in addition to whatever I've done in the morning. Movement is important. And then about 9 o'clock, pajamas, wash my face, brush my teeth, kind of set out the clothes for the day. I look ahead at the next day so I can determine what time I need to wake up based on what time I need to leave the house. And then I'm typically in bed sometime between 9:30 and 10. I'll read a little bit. The very last thing before I fall asleep is that I say my prayers and I do some breathing, and off to sleep I go. It doesn't always work perfectly. Sometimes my husband falls asleep before I do and his snoring interrupts my ability to sleep. But for the most part, that's what it looks like, and it works for me. So I'd encourage you to consider, how can you develop some kind of a routine that works for you? Don't give up on it though. If you try it for a day or 2 days and it doesn't work, don't say, oh, well, none of this that Jennifer said is going to work. Small tweaks, keep them going for a long period of time, and continue to make tweaks so that you can ultimately find the routine that works for you so that you can sleep, because we have to sleep. The only time that our bodies can regenerate, rest, repair, and renew is when we are sleeping. It is vital that we are sleeping 8 hours a night. I would love to hear your thoughts on sleep, what works for you. If you've tried something that I've suggested, I'd love to hear some of those success stories. I'd love to maybe even problem solve or brainstorm with you. Shoot me a DM or an email, jennifer@hopehealingtherapy.com. And I thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day.